I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the HashiCorp Cloud Platform today. We're going to talk about what it is, why we created it, and the vision for where we're taking the project. We announced the HashiCorp Cloud Platform in June of 2020 at our summer conference. And so for those of you who aren't yet familiar, it's really us starting to look at what would it mean for HashiCorp to transition to delivering cloud services. So if you've used HashiCorp tools for a while, what you know is we've long distributed our tools as open source as well as enterprise binaries. So whether it's an open source binary or it's an enterprise binary, the way historically we've delivered all of our products is you can download it, you're free to run it, you can operate it on premise, you can operate it in the cloud, you can run it on your local machine in development, etc. And so this is great. You get a ton of portability, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you operate it, how you deploy it, right? And we have no intention of changing that. We always will distribute our tools as binaries that you can continue to download and use wherever you want. So when we talk about the open source or the binary, to get started with it, there's really a few key phases. Obviously, you have to download it, but beyond that, you have to first start by deploying it, right? So suppose this might be a Vault cluster, for example. You have to configure the infrastructure for it, deploy Vault onto a handful of VMs, make sure it's set up properly. And then from there, we go into an operation phase, right? So when we talk about operate, this is really about managing the life cycle, right? So great, you deployed it day one, but you have to make sure that you're keeping it up to date as new versions come out. You're patching the system if there's underlying security vulnerabilities with the operating system or the environment that you're running into, and then keep up to date in general with new versions, security best practice, etc. So the way to think about operate is it's not a one-time step. It's really an ongoing activity, right? It doesn't stop after day one. Once we've deployed and we're sort of starting to operate, we've operationalized all of our monitoring and alerts, etc., then we're really ready to move on to the third phase, which is adoption. And so when we talk about the adoption phase of the product, what we're really focused there is actually using the product, right? So using Vault, integrating it with our app, doing secret management, etc., right? So in this model of delivering an open source binary or an enterprise binary, the customer or the user is ultimately responsible for all of this, right? And so, while this is great for a lot of our users, they like that flexibility, they like the power, increasingly what we've heard from our users and from our customers is we don't necessarily want to have to do all of this work just to get the capabilities of the tool. How can we just focus on the adoption side of it and actually getting value rather than necessarily having to focus on deploy or operate? So when we talk about a cloud service, right, the goal for us is really to take the first part of it, right, and make this HashiCorp's responsibility. So when we talk about the deploy phase and the ongoing operations of patching, monitoring, etc., this is really becomes a HashiCorp problem. And the customer is then able to focus on just this last piece, right? So this becomes the end user's focus. So the goal when we really talk about moving to this cloud service model is how do we focus on the time to value or the time to adoption? You can skip kind of this earlier phase and goes right into getting the value from it, but you also have a lower operational overhead because that's a problem that we solve for you, right? So, in some sense, preaching to the choir when we talk about cloud services for a HashiCorp user, but this is relatively new for HashiCorp. And so the vehicle for us to deliver these cloud services is what we announced and is called the HashiCorp Cloud Platform. So the idea behind it is HashiCorp Cloud Platform, or shorthand, we call this HCP, is that it will be the common chassis for us to deliver all of our services, all of our applications as a managed service, right? So you'll log in and you'll have an account with HCP, you'll have a billing relationship with HCP, but it will ultimately span all of the major clouds, right? So this includes AWS, Azure, GCP, etc., right? So the goal is that this platform is available sort of anywhere that you want to run infrastructure, all of the major public cloud environments. And then above that is where we are able to then offer our services, right? The products you know and love already, Vault, Console, etc., as a service, right? So what we've announced to date is that we will have the Vault service on AWS later this year, as well as the Console service on AWS going public GA at HashiConf this year. And what you should expect to see from us is a gradual filling in of this, right? So over time, all of the HashiCorp products will be available, and we'll expand that to all of the major public cloud environments, right? So this becomes really the high-level goal and vision of where it's going, is you want push-button managed service. You want it to span any cloud environment you want it to be in. How does this actually work? At the core, there's sort of a shared responsibility model similar to other cloud services, but one of the requirements we've heard loud and clear from our users is that we want to be able to do private networking to these services. If I'm trusting my credentials to Vault or my core network service discovery to console, I want that single tenant, I want that in a private network environment. So the architecture of how this works fundamentally is you have your core HCP account, and then what you do is define what we call an HVN, a HashiCorp virtual network. So an HVN is tied to a specific cloud region, right? So I might have one HVN, and this might be for AWS East, as an example. And then I might have a different HVN. Here, let's just say this is for GCP West. And then I can deploy any of these services into one of those managed regions, right? So I can say I want a Vault, for example, in each of these regions. So you'll get a HashiCorp managed Vault cluster running in these two different locations, one in AWS East, one in GCP West, right? In the future, the goal would be to include the ability for you to specify that you want these replicated, and we'll manage that for you, cross-cloud, cross-region. But now, if I'm running my application, my own infrastructure in these regions, this is where there's this dividing line, right? So everything below this line is owned and operated by HashiCorp. Above this line, as a customer, you can have your own Amazon VPC here. And what we'll support is a direct peering relationship between our VPC that's being managed on your behalf, single tenant, only for you as a customer, and your VPC. And so this enables direct network access. So if I have a web application here, or really any application, and I want to interact with this Vault cluster, I don't have to transit over the public internet. Instead, I have a direct private connection directly between my infrastructure and my Vault cluster running in a single tenant way, right? Likewise, the same exact pattern would extend if I had, let's say, a virtual network over here. So here I have my GCP network, GCP, same VPC. Here maybe I have an API service as an example. I would do the exact same thing, establish a peering arrangement between my HashiCorp managed HVN, and then my application can talk directly over this private network. So at a very high level, you start to say how the system works and what our goals are. We want to be able to deliver all of the HashiCorp products as a managed service, so you get that push button deployment. The onus of operation, patching, security, etc. is a HashiCorp problem, not an end user. So really a focus on how quickly can we get the value of the product, how much of the operational burden can we get rid of, and you also get it across all of the major public cloud environments, right? And then to enable that single tenancy and that private networking, we have this model where you can create these HVNs that are sort of abstracted, and then you can peer with these directly, giving you that private network access. As you can tell, we're super excited about HCP. It has a big vision, and there's a lot of work out ahead of us to realize all of it. But we hope that you check it out, try it out today. The system is in GA, and we're starting with console on AWS, and expect to see more services and more clouds shortly.